document by Ms. Banks, and nowhere in this letter is there any mention of black people.
Okay.
Judge, racism, who they accused Ms. Jennifer of telling a lie when she told Ms. Lambert that Peggy Banks said she didn't want her children, the grandchild, with a black person.
That's what I remember.
And now he's got her saying she doesn't want them with queers or non-Christians or atheists.
So your point is intolerance.
It's intolerance, and we've got another one for black. She said it again. And with regards to being black, there's another witness that will testify as to that.
But it's not in this email to her. But the intolerance
Is the point.
is the point.
First of all, I believe one is irrelevant, but either way, they've never addressed this with Peggy Banks. First, to be able to, go in the future, at least had to ask her about it. And there's no, I don't believe they did.
I'm not asking to teach her. I'm rehabilitating Jennifer Rosenbaum.
You can't rehabilitate, it's not about rehabilitating Jennifer Rosenbaum. It's about rehabilitating a witness. That's what rehabilitation is. Ms. Rosenbaum is not yet a witness.
Well, I think it's relevant, wouldn't it? Let's bring up the jury. I'm sorry? I said it's relevant. In other words, you're going to be committed to ask the question.
Question about black people or about?
The question that relates, this is an issue of intolerance. And it's not simply an issue of racism. And as a result of that, I believe it's relevant, and I'm going to allow the question. Yes. You may proceed.
Isn't it true, Dr. McCullough, that Peggy Banks told you in an email that she did not want merely going to homosexuals, atheists, or Muslims?
Those were not her exact words, and I'm not a doctor. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Okay. Let's take a look at the records and see if in fact you received an email where Ms. Banks talks about not wanting her child to go to atheists, homosexuals, or Muslims.
Can't see who this was directed to.
Turn one,
Okay.
2 pages back and you can see what it was directed to.
I'm sorry, but I can't see. I don't think that previous page is with that one. There's a...
Take a look at your own notes
Okay.
and see if
All right.
you have an email.
I do, but it's not like that. Mine is this.
What does your page 332 look like?
No, that's the client number.
Okay, take a look at
This one,
Excuse me, can you look at this and tell me, is there a client number on this one?
if this is a what?
Does it have the client number?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to show you what I want. And I think this is one, three, four.
I did locate that in my notes. Yes, just as you presented to me. Mhm.
So let me see if you can answer the question. Isn't it true that Miss Peggy Banks told you that she didn't want her child going to Muslims, homosexuals, or atheists?
She did write that in an email addressed to several people.
One of you, you being one of them, correct?
Yes.
And that's not appropriate, is it?
I can't answer for her.
No, that's just for you to answer for you. It's not appropriate to make statements like that, is it?
I mean, I can't call a judgment call on her. That's her own opinion.
But she didn't make that opinion known to you.
She did.
In a separate email, she expressed fear that Millie would go to a non-Christian home. Isn't that correct?
I knew she had that fear, yes.
She also told you that Millie hit herself in the head with a car door and now complains of headaches and has a goose egg, correct?
I don't recall that.
Okay, let's take a look at your records. See if this refreshes your recollection.
It says yesterday as we were leaving, she hit herself in the head with a car door. And now she has a small knot on her forehead and complains of a headache.
So she did say that to you.
Yes.
Now, let's talk a little bit about this line. You've got in your notes, if I may have that back, thank you. You've got in your notes the word prevarication. What does that mean?
On this, within this email?
No, not within this email, within your notes, your records.
I'm sorry, I have, nothing comes to mind.
Okay? Let's take a look at your records. Let me ask you this while I'm looking. Tell us, what does prevarication mean? Or a prevaricator, what is that?
I think we were being silly, Millie and I. We chose words. We did mix up of words, and I can't remember. I would need to see the page, but we did silly words a lot.
And prevaricator means a liar, doesn't it?
You know, actually, I'm not certain. I can't recall right now.
Okay. We'll leave that alone then, if you can't recall what prevaricator means. Fair to say that Millie admitted you that she lies, right? In July of 2017, she told you she does lie.
Yes.
And Peggy wrote you a note about Millie increasingly lying in March of 2017, didn't she?
March. I don't have that in front of me. Could I see that note, please?
Do you recall her saying that or not? You just need to answer that question for me.
Yes.
Millie told you that Aunt Kimmy moved away because they fought all the time. Isn't that true?
They, meaning,
Millie and Peggy and Kimmy.
yes.
And Kimmy is Kim Smith, right?
I do not know her. I understood it was Peggy's sister.
Okay, that would be Kim Smith. This, Peggy echoed Millie and said that in fact, Kimberly could not tolerate the fighting and her reaction to it, correct? Her being Peggy's reaction to it.
I don't recall that.
Let's take a look at your records and see if this refreshes your recollection.
The sister couldn't stand Millie's behaviors and Peggy's reaction to those behaviors.
And what was Peggy's reactions to those behaviors? Do you know?
Total frustration.
And how did that frustration manifest itself?
She would sometimes scream at Millie.
And Peggy told you that Millie's behaviors were intolerable and unmanageable. Isn't that true?
Possibly, yes.
We've got to do something, correct?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that you wrote the word prevaricator down in your notes? You know, show you this if you need to refresh.
I remember scribbling that somewhere. Yes.
So you wrote that.
I believe Peggy brought that up.
Peggy brought up the term prevaricator.
Yes.
Referring to Millie as lying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You wrote in your notes that Nana's influence needs to be watched. What did you mean by that?
Again, I would need to see the context.
See if this refreshes your recollection.
Yes, this was in regard to secrets. I did not say this to Millie, but I was teaching her that sometimes, well, this was secrets, good secrets, bad secrets, and that people that do negative things sometimes do that out of frustration. Example, screaming. And you see that I divided the page, so I'm not sure if it was the negative influence I was commenting about.
Let me ask you this, see if this helps. Did you write, Nana's influence needs to be watched?
Well, I'm saying there's a line between that. There's a good side and there's a bad side.
And it transcends both sides, right?
Her influence was good, but then there was another side that was negative.
Let me, if I could.
Yes.
I'm going to mark this as defendant's exhibit 135 and ask you if that is your record.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
At this time, Your Honor, I would tender this into evidence and ask if I could publish it.
Okay. Debate to be published.
Does it say Nana's influence needs to be watched?
It's possible. It's possible that that's what it intends, the meaning, yes.
Millie tell you anything about Joe? In fact, let me ask you this, isn't it true that Millie never said anything to you about Joe beating her on the back? Did she?
Joe,
Rosenbaum.
I don't recall that.
She didn't say that, did she?
I don't recall it.
Well, take a look at your notes and see if that helps refresh your recollection. See if you can find anywhere in your notes where it says that Joseph Rosenbaum beat her on the back.
Do you have
I
that?
have an absence of that. It's not in your notes, so I take it that she never told you that Joseph Rosenbaum beat her on the back.
I don't recall that.
You don't recall that, meaning she didn't say that, correct?
Correct.
And she didn't say to you anything about Jennifer Rosenbaum making her eat vomit, did she?
No.
She didn't tell you anything about Jennifer being drunk and slinging children up and down the staircase, did she?
No.
And you had her for 30 sessions?
Yes.
That she testified to?
Yes.
Over what period of time?
Give me a moment. September 15, 2016 and March 23rd of 2018.
And she never told you any of those things that I just said, did she?
No.
Thank you, correct?
Let's ask you about, it's a letter that was written by Peggy Banks.
Mm-hmm.
If you could tell us when, the date of that letter.
July 20th, 2017.
So that was after Lynn's death?
Pardon?
That was after Lynn's death.
Yes.
And what was the title of that document?
Millie.
The title of the document that was attached to it.
Oh, the attachment was reasons why Millie Place should be allowed to remain with her great-grandmother in Hampton.
And then was there eventually a time that
Hold on, ask the question.
subsequent to that, was there a time where Peggy agreed that it would be best for Millie to go with Amanda, to live with Amanda?
Yes.
Now, what was the purpose overall of your sessions with Millie?
Millie was talking a lot about death, inappropriately. She was anxious, very fearful. She was insisting that she sleep in the bed with Peggy, and we addressed those things.
Now, on November 15 of 2016, you testified that Millie said there was a conversation between Jennifer and Joseph, and she said to kill Layla.
Mm-hmm.
Who did Millie say made the statement to kill Layla?
It was my understanding that Joseph said that.
Thank you. No further questions.
Did you write that in your notes?
I need to find that. I've got it in my mind, but I would like to locate it.
What you have in your notes is reports heard Jennifer Joseph to kill Layla.
Yes.
Thank you. Did they say it in unison? Do you know?
I do not know.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. And excuse you.
Yes.
State calls next to us.
State calls Dr. Stephen Messner.
Stephen Messner. Mr. Chase, will swear you in.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Take a seat. Please state your true and correct name for the record.
It's Dr. Stephen, that's S-T-E-P-H-E-N, Messner, M-E-S-S-N-E-R.
Dr. Messner, how are you currently employed?
I'm a child abuse pediatrician at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
And what does it mean to be a child abuse pediatrician?
Sure. So I'm a medical doctor, I'm a pediatrician, and I see children whenever there's a concern of child abuse or neglect.
You said you work with the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Is there a certain department in Children's Healthcare of Atlanta you were associated with?
Yeah, so our center is called the Stephanie V. Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children, and we're one of the child advocacy centers here in the state of Georgia.
And where all what campuses do you cover at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta?
Sure, so Children's Healthcare of Atlanta has 3 hospitals. One is called Hugh Spalding, which is downtown by Grady. One is called Scottish Rite, that is up north at the perimeter. And then the third location is at Eggleston, which is right next to Emory Hospital, so it's on the Emory campus.
Dr. Messner, do you happen to know where the Eggleston campus is located in relationship to the Emory Law School?
I do, so it's on the same street, it's on Clifton. So there's Eggleston, then there is Emory, big Emory Hospital, and then there's the Emory Law School.
And what types of patients do you see at the Stephanie V. Blank Center?
Sure, so at the center, which there are 2 outpatient centers where we see children, and that one is at Hugh Spalding, one is at Scottish Rite. And we see children whenever there's a referral for some type of concern of child abuse or neglect. And that's typically, outpatient is typically concerns of child sexual abuse.
Do you also see patients in relation to allegations or suspicions of child physical abuse?
Yes, we do. And we also see children when there's a follow-up needed. So if we do an inpatient consult at one of the hospitals, and we have the children come back for a follow-up visit, we'll see them at the center as well.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your educational background?
Sure, so I went to college at the University of Richmond, and following undergrad, I went to medical school at the Medical College of Virginia. And following that, I did what's called a residency. So after you graduate from medical school, you're a physician, but you're not capable really of seeing patients. So you do what's called a residency, and mine was in pediatrics, and that was a 3-year residency at the University of Florida, and that was down in Gainesville, Florida. And then following that, I stayed on as a faculty member at the University of Florida, and I saw children in the adolescent clinic, in general pediatrics, as well as for concerns of child abuse and neglect.
And specifically with child abuse and pediatrics, are there other disciplines that you also rely upon, other medical disciplines that you rely upon heavily in child abuse and pediatrics?
Yeah, so we interact very closely with the other pediatricians, so the general pediatricians and the hospitalists. Then we work closely with the radiologists, the neuroradiologists, the orthopedics, the geneticists, the ophthalmologists.
And are you board certified?
I am. So I'm board certified in general pediatrics, and I'm also board certified in the field of child abuse pediatrics.
And what does it mean to be board certified?
Yeah, so you fulfilled all the requirements in order to sit for the boards, and the governing body is the American Board of Pediatrics. And for child abuse pediatrics, there are about 350 or so of us in the U.S. who are board certified in child abuse pediatrics. In order to sit for the boards, when I took them, the requirement was for me to be working in the field greater than 50% of my time for over 5 years. Now there's a fellowship, and I was the fellowship director prior to becoming the medical director. So we have a fellowship that trains, it's a 3-year training program for pediatricians who have completed their pediatric residency in order for them to be able to become board certified in child abuse pediatrics.
Do you have currently, or have you ever had any academic appointments?
Yeah, so I have an adjunct appointment at Emory, and I also had an appointment at University of Florida when I was there.
And are you a member of any professional organization?
I am. Yeah, so I'm a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I sit on the executive committee for the Council on Child Abuse and Neglect. I'm a member of the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, the Helper Society. So those are specific for child abuse pediatrics.
Have you ever presented at conferences, medical conferences in the field of child abuse pediatrics?
Yes, I have.
And do you stay up to date on recent publications and recent publications in your field?
I do, yes.
As a child abuse pediatrician, do you undergo regular continuing education?
I do, yes.
You consult with, have you ever been qualified as an expert in a court of law?
Yes, I have.
And have you ever been qualified here in Georgia?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, I would tender Dr. Messner as an expert in the area of child abuse pediatrics.
He's accepted by the court for that purpose.
Dr. Messner, if you could explain to us, is determining the mechanism of how the injury might occur part of your training and your experience?
Yes, it is.
Tell us a little bit what you mean by the mechanism of how an injury might occur.
Sure. So whenever I'm asked to consult on a case, I'd like to get the history first. So that's essentially the story about what happened. And then I want to look at the pattern of injury. So looking at either the shape of the injury, the location of the injury, the shape of the fracture, and correlating that to the mechanism that would be present during that history of trauma, if that's the case.
And is there, when doing this, do you rely upon scientific studies and your own experience?
Yes, I do.
What are the types of child abuse?
So there's child physical abuse, which would include a type of physical harm to the child. There's child sexual abuse. There's emotional abuse. There's neglect and medical child abuse, or Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So would be the big categories of child abuse.
And are you familiar with the literature that discusses some of the reasons why people might physically abuse a child?
Yes, I am.
Can you explain to the jury some of the reasons why a person might physically abuse a child?
Sure. The most common reason would be either having frustration with that child and then physically acting out, becoming aggressive with that child, harming them, or having unrealistic expectations of that child, so expecting them to be able to complete tasks that they're not developmentally capable of doing.
Are there any other factors, perhaps with the person who's doing the abuse, that might affect abuse of the child?
Sure. So if the caregiver is stressed out, if there's been recent changes in the social situation, or maybe in the financial situation, those can be risk factors that can cause a caregiver to act out in this way towards a child.
Specifically at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, what is the #1 trauma-related cause of death at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, the patients that are seen in Children's Healthcare of Atlanta?
Sure. So since we started tracking trauma-related causes of death in 2010, it's been, for every year except for one, it has been child abuse. It's been the #1 trauma-related cause of death through the system.
How about last year? What was the last year?
Yeah, last year was the first year that it was over 50% of the trauma-related fatalities were as a result of child abuse. And so that's in relationship to children who present to the hospital with a gunshot wound or motor vehicle crash, or after like an ATV accident.
What types of people abuse children?
There's not a particular mold or a certain type of person who's a child abuser. Say any adult is capable of it. So you can't specify a zip code or a characteristic of an individual and say that they're a child abuser.
What about socioeconomic status?
No.
What about having a good job?
No.
Are those people also capable of abusing a child?
Absolutely.
And do you see that in your practice and also in the research?
Yes, I do.
Now, are there certain types of injuries that are highly suspicious for child abuse?
There are, yes.
And I want to focus specifically on 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
Okay.
Are there certain types of injuries that are highly suspicious for child abuse in that age range?
There are.
Can you tell us, give us an example of those?
Sure. So if you look at what we call cutaneous injuries, or injuries that you see on the surface of the body, so bruises or cuts or lacerations, if you see that they're in locations that are not over bony prominences, so if they're in unusual locations, so like over the fleshy part of the cheek or the fleshy part of the arm, the buttocks, if they have a pattern to them. So if you look at them and it's not just like a glob, if you see that it's a loop or that it has a squared off edge to it, has two parallel lines to it, those are what we call patterned injuries. When you look at places on the body that are unusual to have accidental injuries to them, it's less than 1% of accidental bruises will be on the ears, on the neck, on the buttocks, and the genital area. So if you have injuries in those locations, that would raise your concern and make you more concerned that that's an abusive type injury. And you're always going to want to put these in the context of what is that child capable of doing developmentally? Are they up and walking normally, crawling, or do they have some kind of disability? And then what is the history that was provided to explain that injury that we're seeing?
And again, is there research to support these concerning findings that GEO supported?
Yes, there is.
Now, I want to talk about the caregivers. Are there certain behaviors by the caregivers that raise concern for physical child abuse?
I'd say there's risk factors. So some of them I mentioned earlier. If there's a caregiver who is very stressed, who we see in caregivers who are asked to take care of children who aren't theirs, or suddenly, if they're unrelated to the child, that can be a risk factor. So there can definitely there are risk factors in the adults that can raise the likelihood that there is child abuse that's going to happen, but you can have individuals who have those risk factors and not be abusers, and vice versa. There's those risk factors not there, and they could also be abusers.
I want to talk a little bit about some actions on behalf of the caregivers. Does delay in seeking medical treatment ever cause child abuse pediatrician concern?
Oh, absolutely.
And why is that?
Sure. So if there's an injury that occurs to a child, those children are reliant upon the caregivers to bring them to medical attention. So if there's a delay for some reason, we want to know why that was. Was it that they were unaware of the injury, or was it that they were potentially covering up that injury, hoping that it would heal on its own without anybody looking at that injury? So we would definitely want to know what the factors were that went into that delay.
What about a changing history that you're getting from the caregiver? Does that ever cause child abuse pediatrician concern?
Yes, it does. So a changing or evolving history over time. So if one individual if there's a history that's obtained at point A, and it is then discovered down the road that there are additional injuries, or there are other factors that come into play, and then the history changes to kind of account for those additional injuries that were found, or if the caregiver was told that those explanations don't make sense, and then there's another history all of a sudden, that really raises our concern, because typically what we see in accidental histories, so if a caregiver is giving a history that something accidental happened, they give that same history more or less over and over and over, as opposed to if they're trying to make the history match the injuries, then we see that the history will oftentimes change over time, and to who they're speaking to.
What about not following through on medical advice? Is that ever concerning?
Yes, it is.
And let me ask you this. So if hypothetically speaking, if one doctor suggested that a child should be brought to Eggleston Hospital for further evaluation, and the caregiver did not follow through on that, instead went to a different doctor 3 days later, and did not mention that previous referral to Eggleston, would that cause you concern?
It would.
And why is that?
Because I want to know, what was that caregiver thinking? They brought the child in for a concern, And the advice of that medical professional was to bring the child to a specific hospital for a specific reason, to see a certain type of doctor. And so if they're not following through on that and then going someplace else, it would give me pause and make me wonder, what is the reason for that?
To be fair, Dr. Messner, the kids do fall, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
And kids get bumps and bruises, correct?
That's true.
Explain to us, in general, how do kids fall when they fall?
Yeah, typically fall like we do. Typically fall forward, not onto your back. Mostly sustaining injuries to the front of the body. Most toddlers that we see will have injuries, and young children, mostly concentrated below the knee on the front of the legs. So that's typically where we're seeing injuries. Like I said, there are protected areas of the body, particularly ears, neck, genitals, the back of the legs, the buttocks, where it's unusual to get injuries just from falling down.
And we talked a little bit earlier when you said there's no model for what an abuser looks like. Is it common for abusers to hide their abuse?
Oh, yes.
I want to specifically talk a little bit more about Millie Place and Layla Daniel. Were you consulted on this particular case to look at some of the injuries on these two individuals?
Yes, I was.
I'm first going to show you the photographs associated with Millie's Place, okay? Over there. Yes, if we can get those. Dr. Messner, first of all, how much you gained weight in 2 years there?
I'm not.
Look at states 328. What are we looking at in states 328? And if you need to, there's a pointer there so you can get down if you'd like and explain to us what we are seeing on 328.
Sure. Will you be able to hear me or no? Okay. So this is Millie's just laying on her back, and the important findings on this photograph is bruising and the petechiae on the right side of her face, and then this petechiae here on her neck. So these are small broken blood vessels on the right side of her neck.
You mentioned the term petechiae. Can you explain to us what that is and how people get it?
Yeah, so it's blood that is outside of the blood vessel. A bruise is the same thing. It's just the amount of blood that's there. So these are small collection of blood that's coming out of the small blood vessels, the venules or the capillaries, and what you're seeing are little red dots. Typically, we see this from a high velocity impact. You can also get this from friction, causing trauma to the skin and the underlying tissues, causing that blood to come out.
High velocity impact, would that be consistent with, say, a slap?
Yes.
Any other abusive type actions that would be consistent with?
Yeah, so if you were struck with an object, a quick strike, so say with a switch or a belt, you could also get the petechiae from that as well.
So now that we know what the petechiae is, can you explain to us what we're seeing in states 328?
And so the petechiae, the largest collection is right here on the right side of the neck, and that's on one of those locations of the body where we seldom see accidental injury. And then there's also some petechiae here on her face, so in front of the right ear, and then bruising on the right cheek.
Dr. Messner, is there research specifically on how likely it is to get accidental trauma on the neck?
Yes.
And how likely is it for a child at Millie's age to get that kind of injury on her neck from accident?
Yeah, so that fits in one of the categories that's less than 1%, and the neck would even be believe it's a little bit less than that, more like less than 0.2%.
Less than 0.2% likelihood that that was from an accident.
Correct.
I want to show you what's been entered as states 318. What are we looking at in states 318?
So this is a photograph of Millie's face. We zoomed in on the right cheek with this ruler here. And you can see the bruising a little bit clearer in this photograph than the prior one. You also see a little bit of bruising, TPI at the very edge of the earlobe, the right earlobe.
And Judge, just for the record, if I could note, since we have different sets of pictures, that these are the photographs that were taken on November 17th, 2015. All right. What are we looking at in states 319?
Sure, so this is Millie's right ear. You can see there are two areas of TPI at the bottom of the right earlobe.
Dr. Messner, that doesn't look like very much. Why is that concerning to you?
It's just that when you look at this in the context of the other injuries, it's concerning. Because you see that there's nearby bruising on the face, the TPI on the neck, and I believe in the next, or one of the photographs, on the back of the ear, there's another injury. So it's all in the same location on the body.
What are some of the ways that a person or a child can get a TPI on the bottom of the ear like that?
Yeah, so it could be from a slap to the face, causing trauma to the earlobe, potentially have a forceful pinch or like a kind of a pulling on the earlobe that can cause that type of trauma.
Is it likely to see injuries like this from accident?
No, that would be very unusual.
States 322. What are we looking at in states 322?
So this is a clearer picture of the bruising and the TPI on the earlobe. So it's right at the bottom of the earlobe and sort of on the back of the right earlobe.
And states 323, I think you alluded to this one already. What are we looking at in states 323?
Right, so this is Millie laying face down on the table, and you can see on the back of her right ear, so this is the same ear that had the bruising at the earlobe, the same side of the body where there's the bruising on the right side of her face. She has this area of bruising, potentially an abrasion on the back of that right ear.
And what are some of the ways that someone or a child may get that kind of injury on the back of their ear?
Yeah, so again, it's a very protected area, all the way in the back of the ear. Get this potentially by grabbing the ear and rubbing the fingernail across the back of the ear. You also get bruising on the back of the ear from smashing the ear into the skull. And so you're getting trauma to the tissue between the hand and the bony prominence.
In 324, this is just a closer view.
Correct. So this is the injury on the back of the right ear.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted into evidence in states 367. What are we looking at, or what do you see when you look at states 367?
Yeah, so this is a child lying on her belly, her abdomen, underwear on. Let's see a few, two red dots here, which are molluscum, or a viral infection. You can see some bruising on the right lower part of her back, and then the rest of it is covered up by her underwear.
Okay. And so I have a laser pointer at the moment. These dots right here, those are not concerning for child abuse, correct?
That's correct.
Would you prefer the laser pointer, Dr. Messner, or prefer that?
Either is fine.
Whichever you prefer. I want to show you states 80. What do you see when you look at states 80?
Sure, so Millie's now in a the opposite orientation, so her head is to the right, feet to the left, and her underwear has been pulled down. And this is showing the right side of her body. And you can see that there's a lot of little red dots, which are petechiae. There's also bruising, but within this trauma, you can make out that there's a loop mark right here. It looks like a horseshoe, so it's like a U upside down. It's another loop mark here and here. And you can see there are kind of these, like, make out like lines of, there's a pattern to this. So you have the loop marks, and then these more curvilinear pattern to the bruising, and then the petechiae around it.
So those horseshoe marks, what are things that can cause those horseshoe loops that you see?
Yeah, so that's classic for being struck with a looped over object. So that could either be a belt or a cord, just something that when you bend it over and you cause that loop where it's bent over and then strike the body with it, you get this very characteristic loop-shaped mark. That's how we describe it, as a loop mark.
And then you also described that you saw striped, I don't know if that's the right word for it. You saw the definite, how did you see, you said after you talked about the loop marks, you also talked about striping. Tell me what you see about that. I mean, I may be using the wrong words here.
Sure. Well, if you kind of step back and look at the overall pattern here, you make out that there are these bands or lines of trauma that are coming across the body, in addition to the loop marks.
Now, talk to us about the type of object that would be able to potentially do some kind of injury like this.
Sure. So you're seeing injury both on the side and on the back of the body, so it needs to be a flexible object that can wrap around the body like that. So like a belt or a cord or a rope, something that can be looped over and then is flexible enough to strike the body and follow the curve of the body from the side to the back.
Would a fall down the stairs cause that?
No.
Fall down a ladder?
No.
How about those kind of wood ladders at a gymnasium where you can kind of climb up on the wall? Would that cause that kind of injury?
No. You would not get a loop mark from any of those scenarios because you need to have something that is looped over.
How about does this, in your opinion, look like it would have anything to do with a seatbelt injury?
No.
Is that even a relative possibility?
A seatbelt? No. The location isn't where a seatbelt goes on the body. It would be further up. Again, you wouldn't have a looped over part to the seatbelt.
What if the child was in a car seat? Is there anything that you see on that movie that can be associated with a child being in a car seat during a movie class?
No.
Now, when children fall, if they would fall in this area, where would they generally fall? Like, how would a child fall if they were to land on this area?
Well, if they fell on their right side, where you would expect to see the injury would be where the bony prominence is, so in the hip, because you're getting, in order to get the bruise, you're going to need to cause trauma to the tissue, break those blood vessels and get the blood out of the blood vessel. So it's where the bony prominence comes down and it's squishing the tissue, and it's where you compress the tissue enough, and so it's where it comes in contact with the surface. So it's where you have your bony prominence is where you tend to bruise. So like your knees, your hips, your elbows. So in this area it would be over your hip.
Would this injury be consistent with falling on a bicycle?
No, because you have the patterned injury there.
You're looking at 371. Is this just another view of this?
It is, and you can see that this shows the loop mark even clearer here. see those stripes. And this is more, the way this photograph is taken, it's more from the back than the side. So you can see how you have injury in multiple planes of the body. It's both on the back of the body and the side of the body.
I'll show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 78. What do you see when we look at State's Exhibit 78?
Yeah, so this is the inner surface of Billy's left arm above the elbow. And we're seeing there's kind of round bruise that's darker and purple, but there's this pink or reddish bruise that has clear, it has a straight line at the top here and does a 90-degree angle.
I'll show you 378 if that aids you anymore.
Yeah, so this is more zoomed in. It may be a little bit more difficult to make it out here, but if you follow across the top here, it's a straight edge, and then you have the bruise extending down here.
Now, why, if it was someone who was hit with an object, would it be kind of straight edge like that? I guess how do bruises form?
Yeah, so they will take on the, if you're struck with an object, you're going to damage the tissue from the outline of that object. And so if it has a straight edge to it, or has an angle to it, or if there's a loop to it, you're going to see the damage to the tissue in that pattern. And so that's what we refer to as a pattern injury.
You also looked at photographs related to Layla Daniel, correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 3. When you look at State's Exhibit 3, do you see anything that is concerning to you as a child abuse pediatrician?
Absolutely.
And what do you see?
Yeah. So this is a photograph of Layla at the hospital, and right here you can see there's a loop mark, a loop-shaped bruise on the left lower abdomen. There's also bruising on the right lower abdomen. And these are in unusual locations to bruise accidentally through normal play. And then you have the pattern of this bruise. There's also this unusual, what we call hypopigmentation, just a lightening of the skin that's going across her abdomen. And it's in a somewhat linear pattern here going across the right below her belly button.
I'm going to show you, put on the screen, State's Exhibit 45. This is just a closer view of the abdominal area.
It is. You can see how this loops around. This loop mark here on the left lower abdomen and the bruising on the right lower abdomen.
And regarding that hypopigmented area, hypothetically speaking, if it was not there from birth, and someone observed that area being red about a month prior to the photo being taken, what would that tell you as far as how this injury could have occurred?
Yeah. Well, that would indicate to me that it was an injury, that it wasn't a birthmark, since it wasn't there before, and that it evolved in its appearance over time from going from red to being now white. So that would indicate that there was tissue damage on the surface in this entire area. And that sounds pretty typical for a burn, and the evolution of the burn, and now we have the healed burn that's leaving the skin in a lighter appearance.
Just to show you State's 67. When you look at State's 67, do you see anything that's concerning?
Yes.
What are the things that stand out to you?
So there's a tremendous amount of bruising all over her back. And if you look at her, we can kind of start on the left here. So on the buttocks, we have a line of bruising here. There's kind of these clusters of round bruises that are over her lower back, the left lower back. Same sort of thing, these round bruises that are over her spine, and then a larger amount of bruising all over the upper back.
Now, when we're talking about the lower back, what are some of the things that bruising could be consistent with?
Yeah, so bruising can cause from blunt force trauma, meaning that it's not cutting the skin, although there are some areas where there appears to be cuts to the skin. So having kind of patterns here where you have a cluster of round bruises, that's typical for being struck with a fist. So like being punched, where you have the knuckles making these bruises. So that would be what I would say that this is most consistent with.
Okay. I'm going to show you states 69, which is another view of the lower abdomen and buttocks, correct?
Correct.
Or let's just say lower back and buttocks. And I think you were talking a little bit about the buttocks earlier. What do you see when you look there?
Sure, so you have this line of bruising, so it's a pattern. Here you have another somewhat linear bruise. And we spoke about these bruises earlier on her lower back. So we talked about the geometric shape injuries, and this one having a line to it goes along with it being inflicted from an object that has an edge to it.
I'm going to show you states 21. Do you see anything in states 21 that's concerning to the child abuse pediatrician?
Yes.
And what do you see?
You're seeing all of this injury along the edge of her left ear. And appears to have a little bit of healing going on, but primarily the skin is removed. I'd say approximately 50% of the edge of the ear.
And again, is this something that you would expect to see through accident?
Well, if there was, an accidental history provided for it, such as being burned, like a curling iron or something like that, I could see that. That would really be the only way I could see that happening accidentally.
If that history wasn't provided, you would have concerns, correct?
Absolutely, and I'd want to know whether or not she was being treated for it, if she was brought to medical care for it, if there was any kind of antibiotic ointment being put on it.
Are you familiar with the term constellation of injuries?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Yeah, so we need to look at the entire individual and look at all of the findings that we have, instead of isolating just one particular finding.
So even if someone presented, hypothetically, if someone presented and they said that the child was burned with the curling iron, would the other injuries that you saw still cause you concern?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you notice anything about her hair?
Yes, and similar to her sister, and we talk about the patterns of injuries and conservation of injuries, we also had injury to the sister's ear, so Millie's ear, like this one on the back of her ear. And I failed to mention it on the photograph of Millie, but just like Layla, we have this really thinned out hair here on this side, which is drastically different than the surrounding hair. You can see a lot of the scalp.
Now I'll show you Millie's photo in states 323. Do you see anything? Do you see what you wanted to explain to the jury?
Correct. So this was the ear injury that we saw on Millie earlier. But this entire area of hair here is irregular edges to it. There's some hair in the center, but it's not as dense as the hair that's around it. And it's a similar finding that we saw on Layla.
Is the fact that it occurred, that it appears to be on both girls, is that concerning to you?
Yes.
And why is that?
Yeah, because this has the appearance of hair that's been pulled out, and that we're seeing it in both girls. makes me concerned that this was inflicted to them. They both have their hair pulled.
Going back to Layla, I want to show you states 22. What do you see in states 22?
So this is her left ear, and I believe it projects very well, but there's actually bruising deep down inside her ear. So it's another very protected area where there's evidence of trauma there.
I want to show you what's been admitted as states 32. What do you see in states 32?
So to orient you, her head is up here on the upper left. This is her left arm, left axilla or armpit. This is her left nipple. You're seeing bruising across the left chest that extends down into the armpit, the axilla. And then there's another bruise here that has a loop shape to it that's on the left upper chest. It goes around like that, like a candy cane.
And is that concerning for you, seeing that?
Absolutely.
You also mentioned it goes down into the armpit. Is that concerning for you?
Yeah, it's because it's a pretty protected part of the body. You have this bruise that extends from the front of the body and then wraps around into the side of the body. So,
States 33 is another view of that same area.
it is. This is the axilla or armpit. And here's the bruising.
States 27. What are we looking at in states 27?
So here you can see, look at this left ear, you can see the injury here on the back of the ear, along the edge of the ear. This is some medical equipment. You're seeing all of this bruising that's on her neck, her upper chest, and on her back. So you have multiple planes. So if you put a flat object on the body, the areas that come in contact with it, they can't, if you put like one sheet of paper, it wouldn't contact all of these different injured areas at once. You have to move it. So that's what I mean by multiple planes of the body being affected.
Now, can you get bruising from CPR?
Yes, you can.
Where would you expect to see bruising from CPR?
Yeah, it's where you're doing the compressions, which would be over the middle of the chest or the sternum.
And in states 3, do you see any evidence of bruising in the chest area, in the center chest area?
No.
What are we looking at in states 51?
So this is the pull-up here. So this is buttocks, feet to the right, head to the left. And you're seeing this loop-shaped bruise here on the right side of the hip. So the hip is around here, so it's kind of more on the lower abdomen on the right side.
What are we looking at in, what do you see when we look at states 52?
So this is, we talked about this loop mark earlier, this bruise earlier. Now the diaper is off, the pull-up. You can see that there's actually bruising in the genital area. And you can see that there's bruising down here on the right inner thigh. You see all this bruising here in what we call the mons, suprapubic area. And then it actually comes down here, there's bruising on the right labia majora.
Is this a closer view of that area of the body?
It is, so this is the right labia majora. You can see there's bruising here, there's a little bit of a, possibly an abrasion there, and then this bruising here on the right inner upper thigh.
Show you states 54. What are we looking at in states 54?
So these are close-ups of that right inner upper thigh. So this is her genitalia here, so the labia majora. You can see that there is a a squared off red bruise here. It's distorted a bit by the glove kind of pulling the skin up. You can see that this has a 90-degree angle to it. There's straight edges to it. And then there's another one right here below it. And then there's some white hypopigmentation of the skin that is below this injury. So you have these two squared off bruises and then the hypopigmentation.
And then stage 56.
If it's a little out of focus. But these are those two bruises that we just looked at. And you can see down here that this hypopigmentation has that same pattern to it. There's a L shape to it. And these are all on the right upper inner thigh. And this is extending more onto the back of the body, so the back of the leg.
Dr. Messner, when we were going through the photos, there were other photos of smaller bruises that you saw on Layla, correct?
That's correct.
Now, were those bruises in and of themselves concerning for child abuse?
No.
How about in the constellation of everything? Can things become more concerning?
They can. And when you look at all of the overall picture is of physical abuse. There were some injuries that appear to be from normal play. So there's a combination of both.
Some of the injuries that we, to be fair, some of the injuries on the they come from normal child support, correct?
That's correct.
Are you familiar with CPR?
I am.
Are you familiar with the Heimlich?
Yes.
Are any of the injuries that we've gone over here today consistent with resuscitative methods from the CPR?
No, they're not.
Are any of the injuries that we've seen here today consistent with resuscitative methods from the Heimlich?
No.
Now, what if someone was doing it incorrectly? Did anything seem to indicate doing it incorrectly? Would that account for any of the injuries that we've seen here today?
No.
Doctor, in your opinion, do the photographs that we've seen here today of Billy and Layla, do they appear to show clear signs of physical child abuse?
Yes, they do.
Cross.
Correct.
Say anything that's not loud enough or not clear, you can let me know.
Okay, I will.
You are salaried from Eggleston or Stephanie Glenn Center?
No, I get paid by Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
Okay. And you get paid for them for being here or for being at the hospital, correct? You receive your salary, nonetheless.
Correct. I'm salaried, yes.
So today you are being paid now. Isn't it true that you testify in lots of trials?
That's correct.
And you testify mostly for the prosecution, is that correct?
Mostly, yes, because that's who the majority of the cases, the requests come from, yes.
How many trials have you testified in where you testified for the defense?
Every time that I've been asked by the defense, which has been about 3 times.
How many times have you testified for the prosecution?
Over 150 times.
Closer to 200 or closer to 250?
No, 150, I would say.
You can't tell us what caused these injuries, can you?
The specific object, no, but I can tell you the type of object.
What type of object makes these 90-degree angles?
Sure, so that would be from an object that has a 90-degree angle to it. I'd say that it's most likely the belt buckle. When you look at the surrounding injuries, the loop marks around there, what folks typically will use when they're as implements when they're abusing children and striking them is typically things that are nearby. So either their hands, belts, cords, ropes. So for that reason, I would say it's most likely the squared off injuries were inflicted. It's more than likely from the buckle of a belt.
Now, the buckle of a belt is usually circular, and these are linear, aren't they?
The belt buckle I'm wearing right now is actually a square or a rectangle.
Where is the tongue of the belt in this drawing? Where is the tongue of the belt?
So in,
The tongue, the little metal object inside the buckle.
sure, so if you look at this one, you can make out that there is a square here and this little protrusion here. I would say that that's most consistent with it.
Isn't this, though, a little, you're saying this one right here,
I'm sorry, I can't see.
this right there?
Correct.
Now, that's not the size of a belt buckle tine that crosses over and sets in here, is it? That's awfully small.
No, so what I would say, so when an object strikes into a body which is not flat, and if the object is not flat, like if you look at my belt buckle, take it off. It's not all flat, right? So it's a rectangle to it, and then you have the tine or whatever this piece is called is not flat either. And so when it strikes in, you're going to wind up getting where the maximum impact is. That's going to cause the most injury. And so, I don't know where the photograph went, but if you looked at that, you could see that there appears to be, now it's oriented the other way. I think if you kind of look at my belt buckle in this, you can kind of see the similarities in so the pattern of it is that you have this rectangle and then you have this additional injury that is parallel to the edges of the overall pattern, which fits the belt buckle and the tine in the center. And you're seeing that pattern repeated twice here.
Isn't it true that this is a triangle? Isn't that correct?
No, I would say this protrudes up. What you're seeing, there's more tissue that's damaged here. You can see that this is a darker red than the surrounding tissue, and you're kind of losing this corner here. So it's how it was impacted by the object that's causing this pattern. But if you step back and look at the overall pattern, you're seeing parallel, parallel, parallel. And then this is perpendicular, but these two are parallel.
Now, death of the child? Do you know?
Of the cutaneous injuries, I don't believe it was any of the cutaneous injuries.
Thank you.
No.
All right, thank you, Doctor. You step down. And maybe excused. Maybe excused. Oh, thank you. You're excused. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're going to break for this week. Thank you for all of your time and all of your attention over the course of this week. We appreciate you making this together. We'll see you on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Ms. Ball.
On the record that I did object to Dr. Messner testifying on the grounds that it was cumulative and that various witnesses have testified to these very same things earlier. And I think my motion was denied.
That's correct. And let's see. I know that they need to plan a little bit. Are you still looking like you're moving through on Monday or Tuesday?
Right now, Judge, looks like we're tracking the rest of it.
Okay. And is there any way, just give me your best guess, morning or afternoon? Afternoon. Afternoon. I'm going to read this one.